Everybody says Hong Kong is more exciting. Well, we're just going to build a casino in the middle of town and take that, right? So I think people don't give Singapore enough credit.
Meet Donald Klip, a famous entrepreneur and a dual citizen of America and Hong Kong. As a child, he moved from Singapore to the US, where he lived until he was 25. Then he relocated to Hong Kong, and now he's been residing in Singapore for 9 years. Donald told me the major differences between Hong Kong and Singapore, non-obvious facts that make Singapore an exciting place to live, and the simplest way to buy real estate abroad. I'm Max Chernov, let's dive in.
How would you compare life in Singapore versus Hong Kong?
I can give you a unique perspective. Well, if you're single, it's fairly obvious. Hong Kong is good. But you see, Singapore has a natural selection, right? So for example, if I'm in the UK or Canada or US or somewhere outside of Hong Kong, and I have a family, maybe a young family, and I get offered a position to head up the Asia office. I say, here's $10,000 US, go to Hong Kong and Singapore, decide where you want to live. You're always going to choose Singapore, right? Because it's safe, you get more and better rental real estate versus Hong Kong. Hong Kong's still a very old kind of city, and there's old buildings, there's stairs,
tiny apartments,
So by definition, Singapore has kind of selected the kind of expat it wants, which is a little slower, a little more stable. But, Singapore, they say, well, everybody says Hong Kong is more exciting. Well, we're just going to build a casino in the middle of town and take that, right? So I think people don't give Singapore enough credit. Now, of course, if your world is going out clubbing till 4 or 5 a.m., well, not many options here, I guess. In Hong Kong, there's more of that type of nightlife and that type of energy. But by far, I think Singapore is a better place to live and have a family. And
yeah, people say before the whole thing started happening like a few years ago in Hong Kong, like Singapore and Hong Kong, they're like competitors. Now it's like maybe Singapore and Dubai, but before like Singapore, Hong Kong. What do you think the future of Hong Kong now? Like, is it still like the big thing?
You're totally right. Back then, Singapore and Hong Kong, there was this underlying competition because they were both considered quite, they were Western speaking, they had a strong judicial system, rule of law, but Hong Kong was attached to the biggest and fastest growing market in the world, and Singapore wasn't.
Yeah. So China,
which is China, right? But I would say, just to answer your question, I think the spirit and energy of the people in Hong Kong is irreplaceable, right? Because it's a hustle society. It's highly capitalistic. But I always say that there's like software and hardware, right? So the hardware are the people, and that's not going to change, and they will evolve because they're mercantilists as DNA, right? But the economy is really slow. And so the economy is slow because it was created to service China. So now it needs to evolve into something else. Maybe it's tourism, maybe it's an art scene, maybe it's crypto related, maybe it's AI related. So all of these things are happening. But, it's like a business. If you're relying on one customer to survive, it's not a good business, right? So I think that's what's happening. You made so much money, but when that one customer decides, I need to think elsewhere, your business slows down. Singapore is probably a better run economy because the decision makers and policymakers, they don't think 5 years, 10 years, they think next generation.
Yeah.
So if I make a decision now, how is it going to affect the next generation? And that's unique.
Yeah.
Unique. And also it has the ability to make decisions quick. And if it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. So I remember, say, for example, a wrong decision. Well, not at the time, but they decided to be the place where the first Chinese IPOs would list. So a lot of them, not because of Singapore, but a lot of them turned out to be not real or not good companies. And then there was, they wanted to be the education center for Asia. That still works to today. Chicago, NUS, they decided to be the biotech capital for Asia. And these decisions happen very quickly, and that's very unique about Singapore.
Yeah.
So Hong Kong, I think it's going to take time. Like if you go down now, it's happening. The restaurants are full, but the economy is slow.
Do you think Singapore is exciting?
I do. I think there's enough to be excited about. And, I have a different mindset. I think, if you want something, you need to find it. It's not like if you're in New York or if you're in Paris. Well, if you want culture, you go to a museum or you go to Notre Dame and take some pictures. Like here, if you want culture, go find it. You go to Little India, you go to Chinatown, if you want to hear poetry readings, there's some somewhere. So you have to look for it. And I think it's exciting enough. Being exciting is overrated a little bit.
I think people have their own idea about Singapore when they come on a visit for 3 days. They go to Marina Bay Sands, Singing Trees, all the tourist spots. I fully agree with you. There are a lot of things that you need to look for. I interviewed this guy, he's American and he does wrestling, a proper American wrestling, the show thing. And he actually told me there are few groups of wrestlers in Singapore and you would never imagine that exist in Singapore. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and culture-wise also, there are a lot of exhibitions and stuff, but it's just not as you mentioned.
Yeah, you have to, and I think that's what makes it fun. In Hong Kong, the places are more obvious. You go trekking, there's a Buddha, you take the cable car. One thing Hong Kong has, which is amazing, I think it's underappreciated by people, is the type of hiking. Hong Kong is a mountain, so it's not a typical global city. A typical global city, it's flat. There's some river in the middle, like Buenos Aires or Paris or New York. But it's a mountain because it was a port city. So on one side of the mountain is where all the business is, and on the other side of the mountain, clean water, nice homes, where people go wakeboarding and stuff. So hiking on that mountain, it's amazing, beautiful, and unfortunately, that's just Hong Kong has that over Singapore. But other than that, we really love it here. We're not moving. We're here for the long term.
Let me share a cool discovery with you. I travel a lot, which is, super easy when you live in Singapore. Because of Changi Airport, the logistics is super easy. But it's become even easier since I found Revolut, the financial super app that keeps all money matters under control. So you download the app, sign up for a free Revolut account in minutes, and choose your card. Mine is right here. With Revolut, you can spend in 150 plus countries with low fees and at excellent exchange rates. If you need cash, you can withdraw it for free from ATMs around the world within your plan allowance. That means no more searching for a bank that won't charge you a fortune just to access your own money. And all this is safe. If you lose your card when traveling, you can instantly freeze the relevant card. And the coolest thing is, just unfreeze it in the app if you find it somewhere under the bed, rather than ordering a new card. So that's why Revolut is the super app. It also allows you to control your spendings and track it effortlessly with customizable limits. Additionally, you can gain detailed insights into your expenses, including breakdowns by merchants, categories, countries, and more. If you want to experience the convenience and savings of Revolut for yourself, download the app using my unique link in description below, then sign up for Revolut for free, spend 20 Singapore dollars and get 10 Sing dollars cash back. I hope my recommendation will be useful for you, and let's get back to the video.
You went to college in the US. How was it culturally for you? Any cultural shock? Was it difficult?
Huge. I would say in Singapore you had a uniform, which is white shirt and blue shorts. And no seasons. It was always hot. So we moved to Seattle because my aunt lived there, and then my mom didn't like living there, and so we moved to San Francisco, where my uncle lived there. Which is where we ended up settling down. But San Francisco is seasonal, but it's almost always cold. In fact, there's a famous
from Mark Twain. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
The coldest winter was the summer in San Francisco.
I know. I spent one summer in SF when I was a student.
Yeah.
And it always plus 14.
That's right.
Doesn't matter what time
Super
of the
sunny.
year.
Everybody has a fleece in their backpack, and so the weather was an issue. But also in high school, because you're allowed to wear anything you want, it can become quite cliquey if you're not wearing the cool clothes and things like that. And also, so everything was new to me. The way I spoke, even though I sound very American, when I go to America, everybody asks me, "Where are you from?"
Did you have Singaporean accent back then?
No. I just had
generic.
I had a very generic accent that is more American, but people in America can't. Even now, I have this issue when I go to the US. There's a few things. So, I mean, good thing was I played a few sports that, sports is really the common denominator of any country. Yeah. If you can run fast, play some sports, you immediately can kind of get integrated. So I was lucky in that sense. But there were, the way I said things were odd. Like, for example, and I don't know if you're going to censor this, but an eraser is called a rubber in Singapore. So I would be in school saying, oh, can you, I dropped my rubber, can you pick this up for me?
But it's condom, right? It's
it's condom, right? But I didn't, I didn't know that. There are different types of demographics which I never saw in my life. I never saw an African American growing up, and half of my friends became African Americans, and so it was a real. I would say it was tough because one, in high school you're going through your growing up issues, those teen emotions. On top of that, you're trying to fit into this new school. On top of that, you're trying to make new friends and not get made fun of, and so a lot of things were happening all at the same time, and you're trying to get good grades.
How do you view US after being American but living most of your life not in the US?
It feels that because the rest of the world has grown so fast, China, Southeast Asia, Europe, that how the US views the rest of the world relatively may have slowed down, just by virtue of the rest of the world has kind of grown. Before it was, US was sort of the center of everything up until maybe the 80s and a little bit of the 90s, right? But the rest of the world has really grown. And so I think relatively there's a lack of appreciation and understanding of what's happening outside of the US. But on the flip side, the US has such a strong economy for the, with home prices and all these type of things, that there hasn't been a real need to focus on outside the US.
Because you have this global perspective, what do you think the next biggest trends in the world will be in terms of economy, in terms of growth?
For the next 50 years, people will want things that are cheaper, better, delivered faster, and more transparent. That's just right? And I don't need to think about, you could also think about when Amazon first came out, you're like, well, nobody's ever gonna, people are always gonna shop at a department store. But that's the experience. But at the end of the day, people want something faster, cheaper, more, more transparent. And Amazon delivered that. It's just the consumer habit change to shopping online from going to the store.
Yeah.
So AI is not slowing down. That is just, I wouldn't be surprised if 10 years, one person can start $1 billion company just because there's just so much tools available. I think blockchain's not like crypto and blockchain. It's going to evolve into something. I do think, unfortunately, the geopolitical issues, it's not going to get better. It may not get worse as fast. But I think there are a lot of issues happening in the world, some that we read in the papers and existing conflicts, but there's a lot of stuff that we don't know that's way beyond our pay grade, and that's happening everywhere in the world. In fact, if you just think about, I think a lot of times we're a little bit numb to this type of news, but what's happening, in a few places in the world is what we see every day. But, I would argue that there isn't a country in the world, Singapore to a much lesser extent, where it could be involved in some sort of geopolitical issue. And my point is, geopolitically, I think things are only going to get a little more tense, however you want to define that.
What do you think, like for your business and for your clients, what do you think the main challenges for them, right now?
Yeah.
And maybe you can briefly explain what you do.
Yeah. So I'm a co-founder of an international real estate financing company.
Yeah.
So we offer mortgages in most countries where people want to buy internationally. So I'm going to forget some, but let's say US, Canada, Mexico, UK, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Dubai, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, Japan and Philippines, and Thailand. So, most of what we do is the US. We have a banking license in the US, so we're, actually a bank in the US. But it's really interesting. I'll just give you an anecdote. So last year, foreigners purchased $56 billion worth of US real estate, down from $59 billion in 2022. So in a world where all these sort of things are happening and interest rates quadrupled, foreigners only bought 8% less than the year before. Compared to domestically in the US, which was down, say, 40%, relatively, it was really strong. And I think even from our business, we started to see, typically our demand comes from Canada, UK, and Asia. We were seeing more demand from the Baltics and from more of Asia. And I think a lot of it is school related, and this notion of I'll just buy a $500,000 home in Texas, earn 12% rental yield, get some US dollar income, and if something happens in my world or my life, or I get worried about things, they can always go to university in Texas and we'll have a home there. Now, outside of the US, if you think mortgage, you immediately think bank. Right? Like you're conditioned to think mortgage equals bank.
Yeah.
But actually in Australia and in the US, there are non-bank lenders. And some of the biggest mortgage lenders in the US are non-bank lenders. So these are banks that don't take deposits. They just offer you a mortgage and they package it and they sell it to, insurance companies or sovereign wealth funds.
What's the principal difference between a bank and an organization that can lend you money but not have a bank license?
So the biggest difference is a non-bank lender, a wholesale lender, doesn't take customer deposits. Right? So all they do is mortgages. So they'll give Max a mortgage, they'll take that mortgage, and once I get to, say, 100 million, I package that as a bond, and then I sell it to sovereign wealth fund or insurance company or an endowment. Once you start taking customer deposits, you become super regulated. So that's JP Morgan's, Bank of America's. So we are licensed as a wholesale lender in the US. As of December 1st, we are our own lender. And all we focus on are foreigners, non-US citizens, and expats living outside the US buying into the US. So it's super exciting. We had to pop open some champagne. It took us 4 years to get the license, but as of December 1st last year, we were officially approved and now lending.
Let's say in Japan.
Yep.
What would be the client? Who would be the client to?
Yeah. The people investing overseas, it's a little cyclical. So I'll give you an example. In 2022 and 23, Dubai was red hot, right? Like it was, it still is super hot, but it was red hot.
Yeah.
Last year and this year, Japan has been very popular. One, because the yen is weak and the prices are low and the quality is really good in Japan. And, Asians like to go to Japan. It's close by. The food is good. And so that's been very, very popular this year. And so the demographic tends to be affluent professionals that want a second home in Japan. It's not necessarily looking to buy to rent out. A lot of it is just second homes, that they keep. I think these high net worth clients, they don't really want to go to their private bank if they don't need to. And actually a lot of people don't have a lot of cash laying around. Like if I say, so a typical scenario would be, let's say I go to your Phuket home and you and I are playing golf and you say, hey, Donald, my friend is selling his hotel in Phuket. He's about to get divorced and he wants to sell it so he doesn't have to, whatever. But he needs $10 million in 2 weeks. But he's going to sell it 50% below market price. So I'm like, I get really excited. I call my private banker, hey, listen, I need $10 million. The first thing he's going to do is call his credit department, say, hey, listen, this client needs money. We have to see what's going on. But they're going to spend all their effort trying to talk you out of pulling money out of them. And because to do that, they have to liquidate a fund and there's some penalties and all these type of things. And sometimes you just need liquidity really quickly. So when there's a reluctance to kind of go down that road, but because, and this is a kind of a long way to answer your question, because we don't sell anything, we're just here to help you with this financing problem. So we make it clear to everybody in our team, we're discreet. We don't talk about you or your case outside of our office.
Yeah.
And once we're done, we're not going to ever call you again to sell you anything. And because of that, we get referrals from private banks and client advisors because they know that we're not going to try to steal the client. We're not in a client acquisition business. We're in a financing solutions business.
Last year, I bought a place in investment property in Phuket. So it's a lot of like Russian speakers now. And like I'll have a lot of friends actually living there. So it's like north of the island. That's 20 minutes from the airport. So basically door to door, it's like 3.5 hours for me, door to door in Singapore to this place. It's next to Bang Tao Beach, it's called Layan. Great condo, the developers is amazing. So basically, and I'm gonna rent it out. 11 months, it's basically renting out, and then for 4 weeks, a year, I can stay there. But we went to Hokkaido with friends like this last December. And after coming from Hokkaido, my friend, he started researching an opportunity to buy land in Hokkaido next to Niseko. I was like, wow, that's a great idea. Maybe we can do that. And because the yen is weak now, and it could be like we can rent it out for the season, and season like in Hokkaido, like 5 months, starting December to maybe April. And then we can spend like 2-3 weeks a year there. I was like, oh, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I think, those things are quite cyclical as well. In the early 2000s, it was Whistler. Like everybody in Asia went to Whistler. Now everybody in Asia goes to Niseko. The issue, actually, from my standpoint, is offering a mortgage is not possible in Niseko. It's very similar to Bali. Because Indonesian banks, so Bali home prices as a relative to the rest of Indonesia, like it doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
Niseko, Hokkaido, Sapporo, Hakuba, those home prices relative to even Tokyo don't make sense, right? So as a bank, no bank actually lends in those markets. So a funny and true story. Last year, we managed to speak to a Japanese bank to offer mortgages in Niseko. Right? In fact, even now, if you Google Niseko mortgages, you'll see us. So it took us a long time to get this bank to agree to this, and procedurally, it was difficult, and anything in Japan takes a little bit longer than you expect.
Yeah.
So we finally got the go-ahead, and then we announced it on Friday, a newsletter, and on Monday, we had 54 loans.
Wow.
54, like we're ready to go.
So it was huge demand.
Huge demand. And then, after we collect the documents and this and this and that, we probably were only able to submit maybe 3 or 4. And the bank said, no, it's a little too much too fast.
Wow.
So,
for Japan.
I think also, because there's a few markets that are very regulated, and just because it's not Japan has been around for a long time. A lot of the regulations and procedures and legality of contracts is very old, so it's hard to change. Whereas in new markets like Dubai, like the laws are just new, right? So they're a little more accommodative. So unfortunately we don't have any options for Niseko or
but Tokyo
for sure.
Yeah.
Tokyo for sure.
What do you think of real estate markets in Singapore? Would you buy in Singapore, or maybe you own in Singapore?
Yeah, I do. Partly because, it's hard to argue yield to, family members. Like, it actually doesn't make sense to own you. We should just be renting. But there is some value in having a roof over your head. And we weren't, although our mortgage went up, we weren't a victim of those crazy rental hikes a few years ago. The thing about Singapore is that it will never be a market where home prices go crazy. So it's not like I buy a place and a few years it'll double. I think there were some cycles you could do that, like early 2000s and things like that. But it's very difficult because the government manages that, so here you really have to wait and hope that prices go up. Rental yields are very low here, right? But I think if you are smart, there's money to be made, like buying fixer-uppers in popular school districts, because all the top schools, people will own a GCB, but rent Monday to Friday a condo near, one of the top schools.
Just to be able
Just to be able.
go.
We did a survey and we've done research on this that the number one decision for buying a home outside of where you live is education, right? And we've done this research. If you look at home prices where top schools are, they tend to be the ones that move up the fastest. So, for example, if you're in California and you're a young family and you say, well, it's too expensive to live in California now, taxes, all this stuff.
Yeah.
Why don't we move to Texas or Florida or Georgia, whatever? These are low tax states, and we'll start fresh. We'll get a job. I can drive an Uber. I can be a teacher, whatever it is. And the first thing you do is you Google top high schools in these cities. And then you go, okay, top high schools, and then you look at homes around there. So we did a survey and education came up as one of the key determinants for that. So, we're all in the same, we're all parents. Anything that we do in life, any decision, we always think our kids. You go to a restaurant, will our kids eat the food here? When I go vacationing, do they have a good kids menu? Do they have a good swimming pool? I want to buy a home for investment purposes. Could my children live there one day and maybe attend university one day? Very rarely are you going to have somebody buy in South Dakota because rental yields are 20%. I'd rather buy it someplace that maybe I could live there one day. I may not, but I'd like to have that optionality.
What do you think of Bali? Bali, like huge yields, they can build a villa in 6 months, and then in 5 years you have your money back.
I love Bali. I can't imagine meeting anybody that doesn't like Bali, right? I think like many countries, it's gotten too popular too quick that the infrastructure hasn't been able to catch up. I mean, going from Canggu to Seminyak is
years.
It could be 15 minutes or 2 hours, right? But the issue with these type of markets that are super hot is you can't get financing. You need a local nominee, and sometimes that presents some risk itself.
Shady stuff.
But also currency, right? And now it's becoming more of like a US dollar-based market. I don't think it's going away. I think Bali's here to stay because it's just geographically, it's so close to Australia. But this just goes to show you the mindset of the world, right? Nobody ever thought you'd go to Bali to live. You just go there to surf and then go back to Hong Kong to go work. But now the way we earn income, how we earn income, where we earn income is flexible.
Yeah.
So, I guess that's also why so many people moved to Sentosa during COVID. Like, if I'm going to work from home, why do I need to, be near Orchard Road, right? I'll just go to someplace with sunshine and a view of water.
Yeah. What if someone from our audience want to reach out? What kind of services can you do?
We have 3 business lines. So one is international real estate financing, right? As I said earlier. 2 is typically single asset bridging loans. So this allows our clients to tap into their home equity. Right? So, if they have a $5 million home and there's, $4 million worth of equity, we have lending options to pull that equity out for their own personal use, whatever that can be, right?
Yeah.
And then third are larger development financing. A family office wants to finish building a hotel in Phuket, so we can arrange that. Most of our business is U.S. residential real estate finance, just because we're a bank ourselves.
Yeah.
So we lend directly. But globally, we have 300 lending relationships all across the world. We call ourselves, it's very popular to call the SaaS model, software as a service.
Yeah.
We call ourselves a FAS model, financing as a service. So we work with a lot of private banks and family offices who need financing and they're not able to help their clients. They give it to us for us to find financing solutions for them.
Yeah.
So residential financing, in particular the US, and then home equity solutions to tap into your home equity. And that's a big business for us. In Singapore, we're the market leader. We do a lot of these. Last year, we funded almost 400 million in Singapore real estate. My co-founder coined this phrase. He said, when banks say no, we say yes.
If, let's say, someone reach out and they mention Max Chernov, can you do any type of special offer or special discount?
Of course. We can have a discount on the fee, or we can give a promotional gift. You're putting me on the spot, so I can't think of that at the moment.
We're not discussing before the interview.
But for sure.
Cool. Okay, we will leave a link in description. So
For sure. Great. Happy to.
if I want to meet like high-level people in Singapore, what would be my strategy?
Buy a $20 million boat. They'll come to you next to you on the weekend.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, Singapore is very unique in that it's a multicultural society. So you have, the Indian population, you have the Chinese population, and then others, right? In each of these cultures, there are clubs, provincial clubs. So I'm just making this up, but I actually was invited last year to a Teochew Association Christmas dinner. Teochew Association, I didn't know what I was expecting.
Yeah.
I go in and there are 1,000 people. And I thought, what is this place, right?
Yeah.
Dragon dance and this, and ambassadors were invited to speak. And then I found out that that's only one of like 20 Teochew associations.
Wow.
It's probably maybe one of the biggest ones, whatever.
Yeah.
And I thought, so I'm a member of the Hong Kong Singapore Business Association. So I went to a Chinese New Year lunch last week and got to meet some really cool people, some people that were, So I think that's one way. I mean, at the end of the day, to meet people, you need to not be at home. You need to be outside of your home.
Yeah.
And you need to join communities that people belong to. Because at the end of the day, no matter if you're super rich or affluent or middle class, you still belong to some community, right? And Singapore is very open about these type of things. Or you could buy a lot of crypto and then buy a McLaren and a boat, and you'll naturally meet your peer group.
Yeah, that's a good one. What's your main principles in life? Something that's really, really important to you, maybe something that you teach your kids?
Be respectful, don't lie, and be safe. Just a funny story. So, when my kids were young, so my son's 13, but when he was young, when he'd go out for play dates, I would say, remember these 10 things. And then his friend would be there and his mom would say, hey, you're going to go to this, Universal Studios. Remember these 3 things. And my son would be, why do you have 10 things and he has only 3? So what I tell my kids almost every day is you have to work hard. Like there is just no shortcut. Like you can be the smartest person in the world, but if you don't work hard, you're not going to achieve. And if you can be not the smartest in the world, if you work hard, you will get to where you want to get to. So working hard is probably said every morning in our house. I've been in a work environment, I think in banking, also on the trading floor, where it's fairly intense and everybody is smart and everybody is an overachiever. And yet you're still working 12 to 15 to 16 hours a day. And there's no substitute, no shortcuts. In fact, people who are given shortcuts in life early, I think it's a big problem because you don't learn the grind that it takes.